Hey everyone, welcome to the rollout. I am Lindsay Rousseau.
And I'm Genevieve Marie. Hello and welcome. Today we have a very interesting topic.
Interesting. Yes.
It's
sobering.
Very sobering, multifaceted. There's a lot of things to get through, but before we start, Lindsay, let's just make something very clear to our viewers.
We just want to put a disclaimer out. So yeah, Jen.
Yes. So some of the topics that we are going to be discussing today might be a bit upsetting to some of you. And we just wanted to make sure that you guys understand that we also understand that these are very serious and important topics. We will be covering things such as sexual harassment, assault, mentions of suicide and self-harm. These things are going to be briefly mentioned and covered because they are mentioned and covered in the lawsuit that we are going to be talking about today. So if this is something that makes you uncomfortable, or if you feel that it might be triggering to you, please maybe sit this one out. We will let you know before we start discussing in case you want to maybe follow up with us until that point. And we will give you another warning before we go into the more serious accusations and allegations of the lawsuit. All right, now that we have that covered, Lindsay.
Yeah, so guys,
today
a lot has happened in the past couple of weeks concerning Activision-Blizzard. If you have been following the news, you know that on July 20th, the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing filed a 29-page Civil Rights and Equal Pay Act complaint in Los Angeles County Superior Court based on a 2-year investigation that they had done into Activision-Blizzard concerning sexual harassment, sexual assault, pay discrimination, and things like that. And of course, that has kicked off so many more things that have happened in the past couple of weeks. We've had high-ranking Activision-Blizzard employees step down or be asked to step down. They are now facing a secondary lawsuit from their shareholders for failing to inform them as to this 2-year investigation. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind. There was a lot to cover in this 29-page document, but obviously on this show, we've previously talked about toxic masculinity within the game industry, harassment and bullying. You know, we obviously had Gamergate several years ago. It doesn't seem like things are getting any better, Genevieve. And this is just the late. And obviously, while we are focusing on Activision-Blizzard right now, the reason for that is because we have this lawsuit. We have this 29-page document to pull from. But we do want to also clarify, like, this is a systemic problem across the game industry. We'll touch on what's going on with Riot Games and their lawsuit, but I don't want you guys to think that we are singling out Activision-Blizzard as being this evil bad guy. We just have the most information about them because of this lawsuit. We know that there's amazing people that work there. We know that there's, you know, not so great people that work at other video game companies. So just want to put that out there. This is not an attack on Activision-Blizzard. It's just us breaking down this culture of toxic masculinity that has developed within the video game industry. So yeah.
Right. All right. So for those of you who do not know, or maybe are not following up as closely as Lindsay and I have, we've been looking at articles with bated breath.
What is it called when you like scroll the news?
Doom scrolling, almost.
Doom scrolling. Yes, we have been doom scrolling for a week now.
So here is a rough timeline of events that, you know, I'm just going to briefly take you through so that you guys can understand what exactly has happened since the information about the lawsuit has come out. So the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing filed a 29-page Civil Rights and Equal Pay Act complaint on July 20th in Los Angeles County Superior Court. Lindsay and I both live in LA, so when we saw that, we grabbed onto it immediately. And this report first came out via the Washington Post. There was a 2-year investigation by the CDFE, that the state agency alleges that Activision-Blizzard has fostered a frat boy culture in which female employees are subjected to constant sexual harassment, unequal pay, and retaliation.
Yeah.
The harassment allegations include female employees being subjected to a frat boy work culture where male employees would engage in cube crawls, in which male employees would drink copious amounts of alcohol as they crawl their way through the various cubicles in the office, and often engage in inappropriate behavior towards female employees. Female workers have also been delegated work by their male coworkers who did not wish to do that work so that they could go off and play video games. Other things such as having female spaces like lactation rooms have been occupied by males so that they could have use it as break rooms or conference rooms. There is a lot more that is happening that we are going to also be covering in the actual lawsuit itself. Then after that, quickly, there was the hashtag Activeblizz Walkout that was held by employees of Activision-Blizzard in Santa Monica, California. This walkout, employees and people who came to support asked gamers and fans to put down their controllers on Activision games and do this for a full 24-hour period. Whether or not that had very much success, considering, Twitch streamers and all of that is, neither here nor there, but it was a pretty big thing. That the walkout was a pretty big thing, and it got a lot of media attention. And then quickly after that, and there were two major resignations that happened after that, which almost was there was almost shotgun resignation. So the head of HR, Jesse Mishnick resigned from his position. So the head of HR resigned. And then the very next day, the president of Activision-Blizzard, J. Allen Brack, turned in his resignation. Yep. So these two things happened, one right after the other. And then shortly after that, the shareholders of Activision-Blizzard files their own lawsuit against the company for wrongful acts and decisions. The shareholders felt that there was some shady dealings going on. They were not given enough information about the full scope of the 2-year investigation that was going on, so that they could not make important decisions regarding their shares and buying and selling stocks. So they're filing their own lawsuit for damages because there has been a significant decrease in Activision-Blizzard stock since this whole thing came out.
It's gone down about 7% in the past week.
And then following up with that, we have the last bits of information that we have on the timeline is that Coca-Cola and State Farm, big companies, are starting to pull out and reevaluate whether or not they want to support Activision-Blizzard through Blizzard's Overwatch League. So they're losing sponsors left and right, huge names like Kellogg, Coca-Cola, State Farm. Shareholders are leaving and suing. We have major heads of the corporation stepping back. We have, the walkout, all these things happening.
And so it's huge. And if you look at the lawsuit, so the lawsuit actually breaks down. So there's actually 10, they are filing 10 separate causes of action. So they detail all of the events, but this encompasses so many things. So the 10 things that they are filing against are sex compensation. So men getting compensated where women weren't, discrimination because of sex promotion, men getting promoted, women not, discrimination because of sex termination, women getting fired much more predominantly than men, sex constructive discharge, again, same thing, sexual harassment, retaliation for if you report it, failure to prevent discrimination and harassment of a group, failure to prevent discrimination and harassment in general, unequal pay, and the waiver of rights, forms, and procedures. So a lot of these women were forced to sign, kind of like with the Riot Games issue, they were forced to sign arbitration agreements, these documents that basically said they couldn't speak out. So it's not just one issue the state is going after, it is 10 separate issues.
Yeah. And so with the state, it's pretty insane because they're saying that the agency from the state of California is bringing this action in its own name to remedy violations of the California Fair Employment and Housing Act from the government code section 12900. Right, as well as the California Equal Pay Act.
Right.
So these things are not just an individual actor, say like one woman or a couple women coming forward and suing the company. This is the state of California suing Activision-Blizzard for violating human rights laws, for violating these laws. And it's insane that that the state of California, because it usually never gets to this point.
No, it's usually class action lawsuits, or it's one whistleblower who's coming out. Arbitration is, and we'll touch on what happened with Riot Games a little bit later, but arbitration is usually the best way. And that's why these women did have to sign arbitration agreements, because shit like this happens, when you go into arbitration, it's sealed. So they might pay you off as part of the arbitration agreement, but the rest of the country, the rest of the nation, the world never hears what went on in that arbitration, in those arbitration meetings. They never get to hear the testimony of these women. And so it is in their best interest to keep this out of the public. And so by the state being the ones to step forth, they are circumventing that arbitration agreement, because you cannot prevent people from, so arbitration clauses cannot prevent people from speaking with the government with relation to a government lawsuit. So that's how they're able to get around what these women were forced to sign, or obviously not just the women, but a lot of people were forced to sign it. And I personally think they learned that from the Riot lawsuit, because, Riot was sued, class action lawsuit back in 2018. Negotiations. And then, they were supposed to come to a settlement agreement, 10 million pulled out. The lawyers were like, dude, you guys owe us at least 600 or 60 million. So they pulled out and said, nope, we're going to arbitration. All of that's going away. And then in February, the state was like, nah, we're going to sue you too. So I think they learned from that. They're like, okay, we can't do this in civil court. We're going to take this to criminal court.
Right. And I know you said, I mistakenly said human rights violations. It's civil rights violations.
Civil rights. Yeah. I would argue, if you look at Amnesty International, they consider women's rights human rights. So we could say this is a human rights violation.
I would argue that it falls under the extremely large blanket umbrella of human rights. But more pointedly, it's a civil rights violation that they're looking at, and not just one or two, but multiple civil rights violations that the state of California are looking at. And they also say, so the suit, let's just dive into. Yeah,
let's dive into the suit. Yeah.
First of all, I'm just going to go right ahead and then read a giant little quote here that is basically exactly what the lawsuit directly. And
we'll include, there's a link in the comments where you can go and read the lawsuit yourself. So we're pulling directly from the lawsuit, just, because obviously things can get spun in the media. So we're pulling this straight from the lawsuit. So if you want to read it, go check it out. The link's in our comments.
And also
for a description.
Also, there's a lot of things in the lawsuit that the articles have not covered that are somehow more salacious than what the media is actually saying. So I would definitely dive into that lawsuit and see how serious this actually is, that these allegations actually are. I mean, more so than what the media is making them out to be.
Right.
So the lawsuit directly states, plaintiff, Department of Fair Employment and Housing, the DFEH, an agency of the state of California, brings this action in its own name to remedy violations of the California Fair Employment and Housing Act, Government Code Section 12900 FEHA, as well as the California Equal Pay Act, Labor Code Section 1197.5 by defendant Activision-Blizzard Inc., Activision-Blizzard, Blizzard Entertainment Inc., Blizzard, and Activision Publishing Inc., Activision Publishing, and does 1 through 10 collectively refer to as defendants. So all of that at the end was just Activision, Blizzard, and all of their subsidiaries, like everything that has to do with that. And then the suit goes on to explain that unlike its customer base of increasingly diverse players, that is about 50% female to male ratio of players, defendants' workforce is only about 20% of women. Its top leadership is also exclusively male and white. The CEO and president roles are now and have always been held by white men. The women who do reach higher roles earn less salary, incentive pay, and total compensation than their male peers, as evidenced in the defendant's own records. These are direct quotes from the lawsuit itself. Linsay, if you want to break down further, that would be great.
Well, and then once we do this, I definitely want to get into their response to this.
Their response is
the official statements that they have put out countering them, but we can get to that.
Insane. Whoever they had for their spokesperson is just a heartless salamander. I swear to God. So the state goes on to mention that the video game world has expanded so much, and the statistics right now are 50% of gamers are women, and that Activision's workforce doesn't represent this. So their workforce is only about 20% women. And as Genevieve said, leadership is exclusively male and white. The CEO and president roles have always been held by white men. And the women who do reach higher roles earn less salary, incentive pay, and total compensation than their male peers. And this comes from their own records. So in the lawsuit, and I'm sure if you really want to go pull up their tax returns, they actually have a list of the salaries of the high-level positions in the company. And the one woman who's high enough up there is making millions less than the men occupying similar roles. So so basically a net total of 3.8 mil in 2020 to 12.5 mil or 30.8 mil of her male counterparts that year. So, and this goes down all the way to the intro level people as well. They document that women and men hired for the exact same job. The women were getting paid less. They had fewer benefits. The men were getting promoted within a year, whereas the women were being told they had to buy their time and maybe would get promoted 3 years later. They were not given leadership positions that would allow them to get promoted faster. And in many cases, it's documented that they were doing the work of not their roles higher than theirs, and were not getting compensated for that. It then goes on to talk about how women were fired much more frequently than men were, especially when we get into issues of pregnancy. That was like a big reason to fire women. We've talked about the breastfeeding rooms where there was no lock on the door. The men could literally just walk in, and kick the women out.
And kick the women out. And then it gets as, and we're talking about on the place harassment, but then we get to some of the more egregious stuff, where at parties, we've seen in the news, obviously, and it's in the document, the reference to the Cosby room.
Trigger warning right here.
Yes, trigger warning.
All right, we're going to,
do we want to talk about Blizzard's response to this, or do we want to dive more into this first?
Let's dive into
Yeah, let's
this
dive into this.
and then do the response.
So then you'll understand why Blizzard's response comes across as very tone deaf.
Callous and egregious, I would say.
Yeah.
But yes, spoiler warning, god damn. No, trigger warning right here if you feel uncomfortable with the themes that I had mentioned before in the beginning. Please tune out. I'm gonna go grab my computer cord because I forgot to plug in.
Yeah. So yes, please understand that the lawsuit brings up some very disheartening things that happen with some of the female employees. We are not going to go into gratuitous detail, but we will be mentioning them. So if this is uncomfortable for you, we completely understand. This can be triggering for many people. So take a break, go get something to drink. But we just want to put that disclaimer out there. Okay, so let's dive into beyond all the pay discrimination and lack of promotions and increased firing. Some of the most despicable stuff that we saw in this lawsuit was the allegations of sexual harassment and sexual assault. Do you want to dive into that?
Yes, let me just.
And I also just sent you a link. Yeah.
Let me just pull up my notes. Let me actually pull up the actual.
Yeah, because again, like I said, we are pulling these quotes directly from the lawsuit, which you can go read it for yourself in our comment or in our description. So yeah.
It's on About Law.
Yes.
It's on aboutblaw.com. You can also, it's free and it's open to anybody who wants to read it. So Linsay, why don't you just kick us off? There we go.
Okay.
I got right to it. Here we go.
No. It's totally fine. I gotta scroll back up because there's so much to unpack here. So we talked about the cubicle crawls where men would literally be drunk, walking around the cubicles, saying harassing things, but also groping women.
And they would play video games, alleged. All of this stuff is alleged.
Yes,
right
this is in the lawsuit, but obviously nothing is confirmed.
Proven.
Nothing is proven, but this is what the state is alleging.
Yes. After a 2-year investigation, we will. I will reiterate that. Besides the cube crawls, which I never want to hear that term ever again, but we're going to hear it constantly for the next year or so, however long this lawsuit takes. But that to me was just absolutely disgusting, where male employees would proudly come into work hungover. They would also similarly play video games during work, engage in banter about their sexual encounters, talk openly about female bodies, and make numerous jokes about rape. Yes. And this is all, I'm pulling all of this directly from the lawsuit. Yeah, that obviously I pulled up here in front of me. We have so many windows open.
Yeah, I know, right, guys? We're trying to be as accurate as possible. So together, making sure we're getting this correct. Yeah.
And they were, as a product, and here I'm pulling directly again, as a product of this frat boy culture, women were subjected to numerous sexual comments and advances, groping and unwanted physical touching, and other forms of harassment. It's insane to even have to go into work and fear that you might have to defend yourself from somebody wanting to touch you, wanting to
and then it wasn't just
work asking you for your number, commenting on your body, commenting on whether or not you are going to be out of here soon because you're going to get pregnant and being a mom too much. That was an incident that happened, that a woman was not promoted because her manager feared that if she were promoted that she might get pregnant and enjoy being a mom too much and want to leave.
Yeah. And then this was not
insane.
isolated incidents. This was numerous times by numerous people. I mean, they even say in the document that one female employee noted that random male employees, so not even people that she knew, would come up and comment on her breasts, and that all of this behavior was known to the supervisors and quoting here, this behavior was known to supervisors and indeed encouraged by them, including a male supervisor openly encouraging a male subordinate to buy a prostitute to cure his bad mood.
Yep, you heard it here, folks.
Yes, they were not, there was no repercussions.
I can't stress enough that this is a place of work. This is a place where you go every single day to earn money to survive. It is absolutely ridiculous to expect not to have to deal with this extra bull crap that is put on you, along, like, not even mentioning crunch time and all of the other
everything that you're dealing with,
insanely crazy things that you're dealing with as, you know, as a publicist or a dev or
an animator or anyone in any receptionist or whatever. Yeah.
It's, you are also on top of crunch time, on top of being pushed to your limit to get your work done, as we know that many devs and many employees in the gaming industry are forced to work under, to also add sexual harassment, also unwanted touching, physical contact, and having to basically fight for promotions and fight to get what your other male counterparts,
I mean, basic pay, comparable pay, stock shares. Yeah.
Stock shares, comparable pay. It's ridiculous. It's really disheartening.
So to get even more egregious, the suit gives a specific example. And Jen, if you're following this, this is bullet number 47. So page 50.
Oh yeah, I'm right there.
Yeah, great. So they name one specific person. Again, we are pulling this from the lawsuit. These are allegations. Nothing is proven until a court of law has, deemed it, but this is what is alleged. That there was a man, Alex, I'm going to mess up his name. I apologize, Alex Afrasiabi, who was the senior creative director of World of Warcraft. And it alleges that he was permitted to engage in blatant sexual harassment with little to no repercussions. During BlizzCon, he would hit on female employees. He would attempt to kiss them. He would put his arms around them. And he would do this in plain view of other male employees, including supervisors, who would oftentimes have to intervene to pull him off. And then this is where the Cosby Suite comes in. He was known to engage in harassments of women, and that his suite, where he stayed for BlizzCon, was known as the Cosby Suite. And this was in direct relation to Bill Cosby being alleged a rapist. I mean, though he was charged in a court of law. So they were naming this suite after an individual who has been accused of rape. And this was known. There's pictures. Search the internet. There is a picture of these guys in the suite holding a picture of Bill Cosby. It's also alleged that his conduct was known to Blizzard Entertainment executives who took no remedial measures. Apparently the president of Blizzard apparently had multiple conversations about his drinking problem and that he had been too friendly towards female employees, but nothing happened. So he continued to do this, and yeah. And Jen, do we want to talk about the worst?
Okay, so
incident to have happened?
Yeah. So. All right,
again, extreme trigger warning if this might bother you.
Yes. So this all culminates. Well, I think the state's biggest example of this harassment, where it just shot the moon and came back, and it's the worst case that they have pointed to, is that one of Blizzard's female employees committed suicide while on a company trip due to a sexual relationship that she had been having with her male supervisor. And the male supervisor was found by police to have brought various sexual implements, paraphernalia with him on the trip. And it was confirmed by another employee that the deceased female employee may have been suffering from other sexual harassment that was going on at the workplace prior to her death. Specifically, at a holiday party, there was revenge porn that was circulated, of revenge porn of her circulated among male coworkers at a holiday party. This is alleged, but it was confirmed by another employee that was working with Activision at the time. So there has been a lot of talk about there being quid pro quo relationships within Activision-Blizzard, whether this is one of them or not. It has yet to be stated in the lawsuit, but this was probably the point, like the lowest point in which the harassment, became something was just the worst. Like this was.
Yeah. And it was from the bottom up. So this really was a culture from lowest ranking individual. And again, we are not saying every man at Activision-Blizzard is bad. I know some amazing men that work at Activision-Blizzard. So please don't take this as us saying all men are evil. We are not saying that. We are just saying a culture existed here that went from the lowest levels to the highest levels.
Right. And again, a lot of this stuff that happens is systemic. It's not something that you can just pin on a couple of bad actors. It usually never is. It's always a workplace culture. It's always something where when you're in the thick of it, the behavior that otherwise would not be tolerated in other places might seem normal, seem like, oh, that's just the way it is. This is just how we do business here. And it's, it's completely normalized. But then when you step away from that culture, from that workplace and those situations, and you look at it from the outside, it's awful. It's absolutely, you understand better that no, this is not normal. This is not something that should be accepted. It's actually a bunch of problems that need to be addressed and fixed from the top down. The fact the system is structured.
Right. And one of the reasons, we keep saying that this was a culture, and people have been arguing this has been going on for decades. It's been said that when Activision and Blizzard merged, it actually got worse. But the fact is that all of, these superiors all knew about this. And the fact, and this is what is the worst for me, the fact that the head of HR not only did nothing about it, but swept it aside, covered it up. I mean, because they're, again, in the lawsuit, it is documented that, female employees were filing complaints with human resources about the discrimination they faced, about unfair pay, about male coworkers belittling them, about this harassment, about being groped, about, all of these things were reported to human resources, the people who are supposed to protect the workers, and that they did nothing. So there was no remedial measures for these women to be able to have their concerns heard when it is noted that, quote, there was a big lack of trust and that HR was not held in high regard. And the other thing that was brought up is that many employees noted that their complaints were not kept confidential. So now we're talking about retaliation, which is one of the things that the state is including in their lawsuit, is that when these women spoke out, that became public knowledge and they were retaliated against, either through more harassment, getting fired, things like that.
Right. And to be honest, you hear a lot in problematic businesses, even outside of the gaming world, you hear a lot about HR and how they do similar things and similar practices where there is instances of favoritism and taking sides rather than just kind of being the cog in the machine that takes the complaint, files the complaint, and then like investigates it. Right. You know what I mean? It just doesn't like do its job because there is a person, there's a head of HR, there are people that, are behind the decision making that HR does. And so there can be acts of favoritism towards employees that may have done something wrong. So this is not just in the gaming world, but
absolutely. I mean, and we're seeing this we're seeing this in tech companies. There's been a lot of talk about lack of opportunities for women and minorities in tech companies, in any of these Fortune 500 companies, which Activision-Blizzard is, by the way. They are a Fortune 500 company. So they are a part of the big dogs. So this is something that is obviously systemic across many industries.
Right. I also want to
very visible here.
Right. I also wanted to touch on, since Linsay, you had mentioned race, that it seems that women of color were treated far worse than white women, and obviously their male counterparts as well. And that has been mentioned in this lawsuit as well, that when men would go off, when other employees would go off and game and, basically shirk their work, if this female Black coworker who had mentioned, who had given her story, said that if she went off on her break just to take a walk, when she would come back, she would basically be hounded by her superior about where she had been, why she needed bathroom breaks, why she needed to go out on a walk, where other people were given basically free reign to do whatever they wanted. And that was just absolutely
right.
Crazy. Yeah. It's so there is also not only just a disparity between gender, but also between race. So even though this is more focusing on the gender aspect, obviously there is, there are other things at play happening.
And of course, this could obviously extend to, because, this lawsuit is just dealing with women. This isn't to say that there are not possibly issues with how men who are also people of color are being treated, at the company. We don't have documented, again, we're not trying to speculate here. We're trying to go just off the facts. If that information comes out, we will talk about that as well. But again, we're just going off of what is in this lawsuit right here.
This specific case. But yeah, there is a lot. There is a lot more in this case that we did not personally cover. But I think it would be a mistake not to jump into Riot right now, because
well, let's do you want to touch on let's briefly touch on Blizzard's response
all of
this, because it's been a little disheartening. So, and they've tried to backtrack a little bit since, but the very first statement released by Activision-Blizzard the day after the lawsuit said in the statement, quote, DFEH includes distorted and in many cases false descriptions of Blizzard's past. It claimed that it had been extremely cooperative with the DFEH throughout their investigation, but that they refused to inform us what the issues they perceived were. They said that they accused them of rushing to file an inaccurate complaint, failing to have good faith discussions with them to understand and resolve any claims or concerns before going to litigation. And they say, quote, "We are sickened by the reprehensible conduct of the DFEH to drag into the complaint the tragic suicide of an employee whose passing has no bearing whatsoever on this case and with no regard for her grieving family." It goes on to say some other things. So that is the very first statement that they put out. This statement is what led to what led to over 2,000 former and current Activision Blizzard employees signing an internal letter criticizing the company's public statement. They said the response was abhorrent and insulting, and that these employees no longer trust the company's leaders, will place employee safety above their own interests. And then the president of Blizzard he sends emails to, it goes on and on and on. So that was the very first statement. Then on the 24th, former Blizzard execs apologized for failing their employees. And then, a senior designer of WoW said almost no work is being done on World of Warcraft following the lawsuit. That on the 27th, they then said they will remove inappropriate references from WoW and WoW Classic. And then on the 27th, the CEO, Bobby Kotick, issued a response calling the company's initial statement tone deaf. So 6 days after that initial statement, they released a second statement, and he promised swift action, said there's no place for discrimination, harassment, or any unequal treatment of any kind, and that they would be investigating all the claims here, and that they were going to retain a law firm to help review their policies and procedures to help promote a more respectful and inclusive environment.
It makes me, it's so cynical of me, but also let's be realists right now. There is no way that they didn't think that first statement wasn't going to just get him in the clear and just be the end of it all, and they could bury the lawsuit once again and have it be quiet and hopefully try and reach some force it in.
The fact that they said they rushed, and the fact that they said they rushed to file this lawsuit, I'm like, they had a 2-year investigation?
2 years.
2 years.
Investigation before filing. I think all right. And you also have to understand that the investigators are not going to be buddy with Blizzard and Activision about their investigation. They're not going to do that.
Of course not. Because one, they're trying to protect the women who are giving these statements, because obviously when they had given statements to Activision Blizzard HR, those were not held in confidence.
And then Activision Blizzard could then go and, try and backtrack and see how they can form their own defense and see what types of things that they can try and keep on the down low. There's no reason why.
No one does that. No one is going to be like, here's.
No one went. No one's going to go and be like, hey, I'm investigating you. Just want you to know, here are all my points of complaint. Here are all the points of complaints that we've received. And this is exactly what we're going to be looking into. No, that's not how this works. I don't understand why they think that, you wanted to be quote unquote civil about it.
So this takes us to Riot. So it's obviously, I think the reason this is making a big splash is because it is the state of California doing this. It is not a class action lawsuit. It is not the individual women coming forward and suing them. This is the state of California. And there's
It's
a reason for that.
Issue. Yeah. Well, it's a civil rights, it's a two-pronged civil rights issue that's covering 10 different like separate cases of allegations.
Right. And if we see what happened at Riot, and if we see what happened at Riot Games, we know why they did this. So Riot, there was a class action lawsuit in 2018. A group of women filed a class action lawsuit for gender discrimination, systematic sexism. Women were not permitted to advance in their careers, harmful behavior, the use of demeaning language, the sending of unsolicited pictures of their genitals, the male employees sending to their female employees, the fact that one employee was allowed to remain in a position of leadership despite regularly making sexual comments in the workplace, and drugging and raping another Riot Games employee. This is language from the class action lawsuit from 2018. So what happened with that is that was a class action lawsuit. Moved forward. They came to their first negotiation, the settlement agreement. Riot had said, hey, we'll settle for $10 million, to which the lawyers handling the class action lawsuit said.
And the lawyers are not part of the state, by the way.
Yes, they are not part of this. Again, I'm talking about the class action lawsuit. This is not the DFEH. The lawyers for the women said, that's not even a drop in the bucket for you guys. No, we're not going to take 10 million. So in January of that year, that happened.
Didn't they say the damages were around, what was it, 600 million?
I think it was 600 million. I am not seeing the article where I'm trying to find that right now. It's on the lawyer's website, actually.
They were trying, basically, Riot was trying to bait them for 10.
Yes.
When where the lawyers came back and was like, actually, the damages are calculating more in the 600 million range.
Because they're calculating
for your offer, but
they're calculating back pay they were owed, all of this. So when this happened, Riot said, you know what? We're done with this. We are now we're no longer going to be involved with this. We're now requiring all these women to go through arbitration because all these women signed arbitration agreements. They can't sue us anyways. We're forcing these, whatever, I don't know if it was 1,000 women. Again,
I think it was
trying to find those numbers.
It was around 2,000.
It was a significant number of women. So they said, no more doing the lawsuit. Each individual woman now has to file her own complaint, which will be with our arbitration, which means it is sealed from the public and no one can see that. So I think when that happened, the state was already working on this Blizzard lawsuit, and they realized, oh, well, there's a way around that. If the state files suit, the arbitration clauses do not cover you because you cannot prevent someone from working with the state on their suit against a company. So that's how they circumvented it. But I think this Blizzard was a direct response to seeing what happened with Riot and again, this goes back to all of these people were required to sign these arbitration documents where they are not allowed to talk about things publicly. They literally says they are not allowed to sue their company. It has to be dealt with in arbitration.
But this also, what we didn't mention earlier with the lawsuit that is against Activision-Blizzard is that the state wants this to be in a public court, tried by a jury in public.
At the very end of the document. Yes.
Yeah, at the very end of the document, that is what they are asking for, is that this is going to be a public trial by jury. And that, for those of you who don't know what arbitration is, arbitration basically is that things are going to be settled in a legal matter, but not in a court tried by a jury. It's going to be settled by a judge, and it's going to be behind closed doors, and the public is not going to know anything about it. It's not going to be publicized. And that basically it's an agreement that's going to be made between the company and the person who is bringing up the complaint, and then it's going to be decided by an arbitrator or a judge. Whereas the Blizzard thing is the Blizzard lawsuit is going to be, or they want it to be very different. They want it to be public. They want it to be publicized. They want it to be in, in a court with a jury where people can, come in if they want to sit down and watch the proceedings. And I think that the reason it also, it not only provides a lot more safety for the women, for all the people that have come forward that, are involved in the case, it also allows the state to kind of be like mask off with the company, with Activision-Blizzard, with who they're, with the defendant, so that the public can understand what's going on, why, what's happening, why this is such a big deal, and that the state, especially, California with their very strict labor laws, are not going to tolerate this behavior.
Right.
It's very important. Like the differences between the Riot lawsuit and the Blizzard lawsuit, they're very important. Yeah. However, Linsay, please tell us about why Riot is not going to go into arbitration after all. That they are going to be treated exactly.
Yeah. Well, it might still be going into arbitration with
it could be.
Which is that's a lot of paperwork for them. But yes, so as of February of this year, the DFEH has filed suit against Riot, and they have specified on their website, you can go to the DFEH's website about Riot. It specifically says arbitration agreements cannot be excluded from a government proceeding. So all of these women can now complain. This has now been enforced by a judge. So yes. So the class action lawsuit is no longer happening. However, there was one woman who did not sign that document who might still be moving forward with her suit. So the lawyers, Jeannie Harrison Law Firm, has said that they are continuing to litigate the class action lawsuit against Riot. And that what the state is doing is separate. So now Riot has got multiple things going. They have the class action lawsuit. Apparently, they're now about to do arbitration cases with X number of women. And now they've got the state continuing. However, it was very interesting. An IP lawyer, Kellen Boyer, said he doesn't think that the case against Riot is going to go to court because, again, this is where it all comes back to why they have arbitration agreements. It is in their best interest to keep all this information out of the media. They don't want this to go to trial. So typically, the parties will settle once the defendant has a better idea of the evidence being brought against them. So once Riot sees what the state is bringing towards them and weighing that with the negative press that each of these cases, each of these individual women's stories is going to entail, they probably are, and again, this is all speculation, they're probably not going to want to go through a long public trial because of the damage it could do to their brand and the impact it could have on hiring new talent. So they are now looking at multiple instances of legal action privately on the state level. Obviously, they're not making statements about it because this is all ongoing. We don't have very much information about this except the one statement that a Reddit user found, the one statement from the DFEH saying that they are filing this case. Any woman who has been impacted by this, please contact us and tell us your story. Your arbitration clause does not prohibit you from talking to us. Yep. So, yeah. So I'm sure we'll get more information about that once information starts coming out about that, once they file a much longer document. Because this is what they're planning to do. It has not been filed in Superior Court yet. So yeah, that was a lot to unpack.
It's a lot. And again, I think that like adding in Riot to the mix really just hammers home Linsay's and my point that it's not just Blizzard. It is
no.
gaming companies across the board that have these issues. The work culture is pervasive. This toxic work culture is pervasive, and it has been allowed to continue on this way across multiple companies for decades. And it's just something that unless the government gets involved, as they are starting to, as they have, there are not going to be major changes just because this is how the system was built. This is how it is currently structured. But having somebody from the outside with the power to force a restructuring and force them to be better is something that can actually make real change.
Right. And this goes to the larger culture of video games, because, we've heard a lot about crunch culture, about these employees having to work really hard. And we've seen, Game Workers United is kind of a movement that's been working to try and unionize video game workers, devs, animators, all of those, testers, all of those people. And it's been so very hard for them because these people are all at different companies. They're usually rotating through different companies. They're not staying at one place very long. So there has been a very strong movement to try and unionize the game industry. And one of the reasons we have unions is to try and protect workers' rights. Everything from getting properly compensated for overtime, getting days off, not being forced to work 15-hour days, 7 days a week for 4 months because your game's coming out soon, all the way to these egregious, because, if you have a union backing you, if you're not getting help from HR, you go to your union lawyer, you go to your union rep, and then they help you. But this
you have another avenue.
Yeah, this speaks to the larger problem with the fact that there is no union presence in the video game industry, despite so many people. And again, if you don't know who Game Workers United are, please check them out. They're doing some great work. And and we're not saying there aren't other people who are being hurt at these game companies who are not women. We're not saying that. And again, we'll reiterate, we're not saying that everybody who works, all the white men at Riot are bad, all the white men at Activision-Blizzard are bad. We are not saying that. But it is obvious that there is a culture that exists here that has to stop. It's 2021. It has to stop. And, obviously we'll be following this, if this goes to trial, this could be a 3-year process. We don't even know.
Oh yeah.
It could take forever. And you know what, even if it doesn't go to trial and it, the threat of it alone is enough to make the company change its practices and maybe make other video game companies think, ooh, maybe we should reevaluate how we do things. But, Genevieve and I, we've talked about this a lot on the show. We're big gamers. We love video games. I do voiceover in video games. It is my favorite medium to work in. I love it. I have worked on some Blizzard games. I absolutely adore their games. We're passionate about this. And because we're passionate, we just want to make it better. We want to make it better for everyone who's working in these industries, because they do amazing things. We have been so influenced by video games in our lives that, we don't want it to go away. We don't want to tear down the structure. We just, want to make things a little bit better.
Right. Like honestly, we don't want like new games and updates to games at the expense of people's health and safety.
Yes.
That is what we're trying to get at, is that no matter, like, we would rather things slow down as far as releases, we would rather things take longer, slow down, than to have this continually be an issue, like all these issues continually keep going and be allowed to be allowed and be accepted, because it's just not right. It's not worth getting that game a couple months earlier. It's not worth being able to live stream that game that you really wanted
Yeah.
a lot faster. And I feel that like as consumers of the games, as creators and as both creators and consumers of video games, we do have a responsibility.
Yeah. And we have social media now,
Yeah.
When the walkout happened, Twitter was trending with all the people that were supporting it, the Twitch streamers who stopped streaming Blizzard games for that day. We are in the world of social media where your voice as a consumer can make a difference.
Oh, yes.
Consumers are putting out tweets and posts saying, we're not okay with this. Those companies are going to listen to that because that directly impacts their bottom line. So you guys can help,
Yeah.
Yeah.
We would highly encourage to use your voices to, speak out about what's happening. That's how change is made on, in a grassroots level. I think that, we live in a time where consumer opinion has never been more important or listened to by large corporations. And so like, even if you're not within the industry, you can still make a difference by siding with those who need your support.
Yeah. And stay informed,
Oh yeah. And stay on top of it, because this stuff, it's coming out. Again, those resignations that we talked about earlier came out within a 24-hour period of each other. It really was just boom, boom. And so like this stuff is coming out so fast. Linsay and I will try and keep on top of it.
We'll try and keep up as keep you updated as more information comes out.
I'm sure we'll have another. I mean, we have gone on about this for so long, but there's so much to cover. But as more comes out and as, bigger events happen, I'm sure that we're going to come back on and discuss this again, just to give you guys an update so that you're not hanging and wondering, whatever happened.
Yeah.
But for now, this is all the information that we have. We are really just, we really just thought that this was something that you guys needed to hear about, to know more about. And hopefully this was useful. This was helpful to you guys. Very informative, because it is difficult to get into the nitty-gritty of things yourself. I mean, you don't have a lot of time in the day, to do every day.
And this was a unique instance where we had a 29-page legal document to pull from, because like obviously when Riot happened, people thought change was going to happen, but no one knew what was going on because it was all behind closed doors, because it was a class action lawsuit, nothing could be talked about. So, this gave us an opportunity to talk about things because it's in the public record. So yeah. Well, on that note,
well,
thanks for joining us. And of course, if you have thoughts, please let us know in the comments.
Yep. If you have thoughts, if you have updates or articles to share, please put those down in the comments. If you liked what you saw here and want to hear more or have suggestions of things that we can cover and do, please also leave those down in the comments as well. We'd love to hear them so that you guys get the content that you are looking forward to, what you like. It allows us to tailor what we do to your needs. So please like the video, subscribe, ring that bell so you get notifications every time that we have an update. We update every Friday at noon Pacific Standard Time. We always enjoy our time here talking about topics in the geek world, even if they are things that are heavy,
a little bit harder,
and harder to talk about, like we did today. If you would like us to dig more deeply into other conversations that do have more of a serious tone, let us know. If that's something that you would rather not hear, also let us know. Either way, we're interested, because this is something new for us too.
We're just figuring it out, and
quite had a show that was like this. But yes, so remember, like and subscribe, and we will see you next week. with hopefully a
A
brighter.
lighter. Yeah, we'll figure it out. All right. Bye, guys.
All right. Bye, guys.